I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room when my phone rang. My only daughter's voice was on the other end, but it wasn't filled with love. It was cold, ruthless. She said, "Mom, we're leaving for Europe tomorrow. I already sold your beach house and your car. We needed the money, bye." Then she hung up. Just like that, 45 years of raising her, sacrificing for her, and she discarded me like garbage. But what she didn't know was that my late husband had left me with a secret that would change everything. I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room when my phone rang. The ringtone echoed too loudly against the sterile white walls, and I fumbled to answer it. My only daughter, Lydia, was on the line. Her voice was cold, flat, and unnervingly businesslike as she said, "Mom, we're going on a trip to Europe tomorrow. I already sold your beach house and your car. We needed the money, bye." Just like that, she hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. 45 years of raising her, sacrificing every comfort so she could have everything, and she discarded me with a single call. But instead of crying, instead of feeling destroyed, something unexpected happened inside me. I took a deep breath, and for the first time since my husband Charles died 6 months ago, I smiled. Because there was something my dear daughter didn't know. I'm Margaret Brooks. I'm 71 years old. Until that phone call, I thought I knew my daughter. I thought she loved me, or at least respected me. When Charles passed away suddenly from a heart attack one quiet morning while serving me breakfast, Lydia had been by my side. She had helped with the funeral arrangements, accompanied me on grocery trips, and even urged me to see a doctor for checkups. I mistook her attention for love, for concern. Now I understood the truth. It was convenience. She was circling like a hawk, waiting for her moment to strike, and she had struck, selling the beach house that had been our family sanctuary for decades, and my husband's beloved truck, the last thing that still carried his scent. She thought she had taken everything from me. But what she didn't know was that Charles had always been a man who planned ahead. 3 days before he died, Charles handed me a manila envelope. "Margaret," he said in that gentle voice of his, "put this in your dresser drawer. Don't open it yet, only when you feel ready." I hadn't thought much of it at the time, grief swallowing every detail in those dark weeks after the funeral. But the envelope was still waiting at home. As the nurse called my name in the waiting room, I rose calmly, almost eager now. The doctor examined me, told me I was in good health for my age, reminded me to rest more and eat better. I nodded, but my mind was far away, fixed on that manila envelope. Lydia believed she had left me with nothing, but I knew better. Charles had never let me drift unprotected. Not in life, and certainly not in death. When I finally returned home, the house felt different, alive with a kind of quiet energy. I walked straight to the dresser in our bedroom and pulled out the envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it, unfolding the papers inside as if unwrapping a birthday gift. My breath caught. Inside were legal documents, bank certificates, and deeds. Tucked among them was a letter in Charles's neat handwriting. My eyes blurred with tears as I read, "My dearest Margaret, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. Forgive me for not telling you everything while I was alive. I wanted to spare you worry, but you deserve to know the truth. I have left you more than just memories. You are safe. You will never want for anything. And Margaret, there is something else you must know. His name is Daniel." My heart stopped. I read it again, disbelieving. Charles had another son, a child he had never spoken of in 45 years of marriage. My hands shook as I lowered the letter. He had hidden something so huge from me, something that changed everything I thought I knew about our life together. I spent the next morning at the bank, clutching the key that had been tucked inside the envelope. In the quiet of a private room, the manager opened Charles's lockbox and set the contents on the table before me. My breath caught again as I stared at stacks of bonds, property deeds, and account documents, all in my maiden name. Charles had built a quiet fortune, hidden from Lydia, hidden even from me. He had secured my future against betrayal, but among the papers was another envelope, marked simply for Daniel. I hesitated. My heart raced with questions. Who was he? Did he know Charles was his father? Did he even know I existed? I couldn't open it yet. I wasn't ready. When I returned home that afternoon, the phone rang again. Lydia's voice was brisk, impatient. Mom, Eric and I are boarding tomorrow morning. I left some junk in the garage. Throw it out if you want. And don't worry about the bills, I handled them. My jaw clenched. You sold the house and the truck without asking me, I said quietly. A sharp laugh crackled through the receiver. Oh, Mom, you're too sentimental. They were just things. You can't use them anymore. We got good money. You should be thanking me. Eric says we'll invest it smartly. It's all for the family in the long run. Her words dripped with arrogance. The family she spoke of didn't include me at all. For a moment I wanted to scream at her, to throw Charles's secrets in her face, but instead I smiled silently. She hung up without a goodbye. I slipped the letter back into the envelope. Let her think she had stripped me bare. What she didn't know would soon change everything. That night, I dreamed of the beach house. Charles on the porch, waving, calling me home. I woke with tears on my cheeks, but also with a new fire in my chest. Charles had left me a path, and I would follow it. Among the deeds was an address I had never seen before. The next morning, I dressed neatly, pulled my hair into a bun, and set out. The bus took me across town to a quiet neighborhood I didn't recognize, lined with tall trees and houses that seemed to breathe with stories of their own. And then I saw it, a beautiful, modest house tucked behind a wrought iron gate. The address matched. It was mine, hidden in my maiden name. My breath caught as I pushed the gate open and slid the brass key into the lock. The door creaked as though welcoming me. Inside, the house was furnished, simple but warm, shelves filled with books, a kitchen stocked with plates, a living room with chairs draped in dust covers. It felt like a home waiting for someone. Had Charles come here? Had he built this as a sanctuary for me? Or was it connected to Daniel? In the study, I found a desk. My pulse quickened as I opened the drawer and found a safe. The smaller key fit perfectly. Inside were leather-bound journals, each one filled with Charles's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened the first. The earliest entry was 20 years old. Margaret doesn't know, it began. I can't tell her, not yet. But I must find a way to provide for Daniel. He deserves something, even if I can't be in his life. Page after page, Charles poured out his guilt, his love, his struggles. He wrote of me with devotion, of Lydia with pride, but always the shadow of Daniel hung over his words. My husband had lived a double life in his heart, carrying a burden I never knew. I closed the journal, my chest heavy with sorrow, not anger. He had tried to do right by everyone, but secrets have a way of breaking even the strongest hearts. I sat in that dusty study until the sun dipped low, reading until the pages blurred. Finally, I set the journal down and made a choice. I would find Daniel, not out of obligation, not just for Charles, but because I needed answers. Who was this man my husband had left behind? What life had he lived? Did he even know he had another family? Did he resent us? Or was he lost, waiting for someone to find him? I locked the safe again, tucked one journal under my arm, and closed the house behind me. The key was mine, the house was mine, the secrets were mine, but soon, they would no longer be secrets. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the journal open before me, Charles's handwriting glowing faintly under the lamp. I traced the letters with trembling fingers. Then I looked at the envelope marked for Daniel. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I'll begin. Lydia believed she had ended my story when she sold my house and truck, but what she didn't know was that my story was only just beginning. The night after I discovered the journals, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Charles's handwriting, his words about Daniel, the pain he carried for decades in silence. The envelope marked for Daniel sat on the table like a silent judge, daring me to open it. I kept telling myself I would wait until morning, that I needed rest to face whatever truth it contained, but my hands itched to tear it open. When the first rays of dawn filtered through the curtains, I made myself a cup of coffee, sat at the table, and finally slid a finger beneath the seal. Inside was a letter, short but heavy with weight. Daniel, Charles had written, if you are reading this, then your father is gone. I never gave you what you deserved, but I never forgot you. I have left provisions for you. Margaret will know what to do. Please, if you can, forgive me. The words cut into me like glass. Margaret will know what to do. He had trusted me to be the bridge to a son I had never met. A son who might not even want to meet me. But I knew one thing for certain. I had to find him. The letter included an address. My pulse quickened as I read it again and again. It was across the city, in a neighborhood I didn't know. My first instinct was fear. What if Daniel didn't want me? What if he hated Charles for abandoning him? What if he lashed out at me, seeing me as the woman who stole the life he could have had? But fear was no match for determination. Lydia thought she had stripped me of everything, but I still had choices. I still had secrets she couldn't touch. I dressed carefully, pinned my hair, tucked the letter into my purse, and set out. On the bus ride, I watched the world pass by outside the window. Families walking together, children laughing, people rushing to work. They all had their own stories, their own heartbreaks. Mine was just beginning to unravel. The address led me to a modest apartment building with peeling paint and flower pots on the windowsills. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart hammering harder with every step. At the door with the number scrawled in Charles's letter, I paused, raised my hand, and knocked. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door creaked open, and a man in his 40s stared at me. His face was sharp but familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. His eyes, his jawline, the tilt of his head all carried faint echoes of Charles. "Can I help you?" he asked cautiously. My throat went dry. "Daniel?" I whispered. He frowned, suspicious. "Yes, who are you?" My hands trembled as I pulled the letter from my purse. "My name is Margaret. I'm Charles's wife. He asked me to give you this." For a second, he didn't move. Then he took the envelope slowly, his eyes flickering with something unreadable. He didn't invite me in. Instead, he closed the door gently, leaving me standing in the hallway with my heart thundering. I waited for what felt like forever before the door finally opened again. His expression was different now, softer, but filled with storm clouds. "Come in," he said quietly. I stepped inside a small but tidy apartment. The furniture was worn but clean. Photographs lined the shelves. Scenic landscapes, not people. On the table, Charles's letter lay open. Daniel sat heavily in a chair and rubbed his temples. "So he finally told you," he muttered. My chest tightened. I only found out after he passed. He kept journals. He left everything to me, and he left something for you. Daniel's eyes darkened. "Everything to you," he repeated bitterly. "That sounds about right." I flinched. "I didn't know about you, Daniel. I swear it. He never told me. I thought I knew my husband, but he carried this alone." His gaze softened slightly, but the pain didn't leave. "He visited me a few times when I was young, gave my mother money, made promises. Then he vanished. I grew up hating him, hating the family he chose instead of me. Do you have any idea what that's like?" My eyes filled with tears. "No, but I know what it's like to lose him. And I know he regretted everything. He wanted me to find you. He wanted me to make it right." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Make it right? He's gone. There's no making it right." But his voice cracked, betraying the hurt beneath the anger. I reached into my purse and slid one of the bank certificates across the table. "He left this for you. It's in your name. He wanted you to be secure." Daniel stared at it, his jaw tightening. Why would I accept money from a man who couldn't give me his name? I leaned forward, my voice trembling. "Because it's not just money, Daniel. It's his way of saying he never forgot you. And it's my way of saying I want to know you. Not as a duty, not out of pity, but because you're part of him. And that makes you part of me too." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Finally, Daniel looked away, his shoulders slumping. "You don't owe me anything," he murmured. "Maybe not," I said softly. "But I want to." For the first time, he looked directly at me, and I saw Charles in his eyes. The resemblance struck me so hard I had to catch my breath. For a moment, I thought he might break, but instead he stood abruptly. "I need time," he said flatly. "This is a lot. I can't just welcome you into my life because you showed up with a letter." I nodded, rising slowly. "I understand. I'll give you space, but I'll be here if you want to talk." He didn't reply. I let myself out, my heart both heavy and strangely light. He hadn't slammed the door on me completely. That was something. On the bus ride home, I couldn't stop thinking about him. His bitterness, his pain, his resemblance to Charles. I wanted to reach him, to mend what decades of secrets had broken, but I knew it would take time. When I got back, the phone rang again. Lydia. Her voice was bright, careless. "Mom," We landed in Paris. Isn't that exciting? Don't worry about anything back home. We'll be gone a few weeks. Oh, and if you get any mail about the property sales, just sign them, okay? Eric's handling all the details. My grip tightened on the phone. She had no idea about the lockbox, the hidden house, the accounts. Of course, dear, I said sweetly, masking my fury. When she hung up, I laughed softly to myself. Lydia thought she had taken everything. She didn't know I had just met her half-brother. She didn't know the legacy Charles had left behind. And she didn't know that I wasn't the helpless woman she believed me to be. That night, I returned to the hidden house Charles had left me. I unlocked the door, settled into the dusty study, and opened another journal. In it, Charles wrote about visiting Daniel as a boy, about the guilt that gnawed at him every day. I love Margaret, one entry said. I would never betray her, but my betrayal is in silence. Every time I kiss her goodnight, I feel the weight of the secret I cannot share. I pressed my hand to the page, my eyes burning. How heavy that burden must have been, how much it must have cost him to carry it. And now it was mine to carry too, but I was not alone anymore. Daniel existed. He was real, and somehow, I knew this was only the beginning. Lydia thought she had ended my story, but what she didn't know was that Charles's secrets had given me a new one, a story that was only just unfolding. The days after meeting Daniel were filled with an ache I couldn't quite name. I thought about him constantly. The way his eyes held the same quiet storm as Charles's, the bitterness in his voice, the wall he had built around himself. I replayed our conversation in my mind, wondering if I had said too much or too little, but mostly, I wondered if he would ever call me. The silence from his side was heavy, yet I refused to lose hope. At the same time, Lydia's absence hung like both a blessing and a shadow. From Paris, she sent me occasional texts, always dripping with arrogance. Photos of champagne glasses, luxury hotels, and captions like, "Living the life we deserve, Mom." She thought I was sitting at home broken and powerless. She had no idea that every day I visited the house Charles had left me, poring through his journals, piecing together the life he had hidden. The more I read, the more my emotions tangled into knots. Charles had loved me, of that I had no doubt. His words for me were tender, filled with devotion. But in almost every journal there was a page about Daniel. His worry, his guilt, his attempts to send money secretly through a friend. One entry broke me completely. Daniel asked today why he doesn't have my name. I told him some men aren't allowed to be what they want to be. He cried. I cried too, though not where he could see. I pressed the book to my chest and wept until my hands shook. It was unbearable to imagine Charles, my strong Charles, reduced to tears by secrets he carried for decades. And it was unbearable to imagine a boy growing up feeling unwanted because of those same secrets. One afternoon, as I left the hidden house, I saw a figure leaning against the fence. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized Daniel. He looked tired, his clothes a little worn, but his eyes were sharp. "You weren't lying," he said quietly, glancing at the house behind me. "This place? It's his, isn't it?" I nodded, stepping closer. "Ours now," I whispered. He walked past me and into the house as though testing whether it would accept him. Inside, he moved slowly through the rooms, brushing dust from the furniture, touching the spines of books. "He lived a whole other life, didn't he?" he murmured. I swallowed hard. "Not lived, Daniel. Prepared. He built this for you, for us. He couldn't bring himself to tell me when he was alive, but he wanted you to have it." He sat in the study and picked up one of the journals. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages. "His handwriting," he whispered. "I remember seeing it on birthday cards when I was little." Then nothing. Just silence. He looked up at me, his eyes dark. "Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up knowing your father exists but never seeing him at school events? Never hearing him say he's proud of you?" My throat tightened. "No," I admitted. "But I know what it's like to lose him, and to learn I didn't know the whole man I loved. Maybe we're both grieving different versions of him." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then, unexpectedly, Daniel chuckled bitterly. "You're not what I expected." I tilted my head. "And what did you expect?" He sighed. "Some bitter old woman who'd hate me for existing." I reached across the desk, my voice gentle. I could never hate you, Daniel. You're part of him. That makes you part of me." For the first time, something in his expression softened. He set the journal down and leaned back in the chair. "I don't know what to do with all this. Part of me wants to burn every page. Part of me wants to devour them all. I'm angry, but I can't stop wanting to know." I smiled sadly, then read, "Take your time. Let him speak to you through the words he couldn't say aloud." He nodded slowly, almost reluctantly. That day we spent hours in silence, him reading, me simply sitting nearby. It wasn't comfortable, not yet, but it was a beginning. Meanwhile, Lydia continued sending messages that made my blood boil. One evening, she called me on video chat, her face glowing with excitement. "Mom, Paris is amazing. Eric says we might invest in a little villa here. Imagine our family owning property in France." I forced a smile. "That sounds ambitious, dear." She grinned, swirling her wine glass. "Don't worry, you'll be proud of us. This is all thanks to your sacrifices. And hey, when we come back, maybe we can finally sell your old house too. It's too much for you anyway." My grip on the phone tightened, but I kept my voice light. "We'll talk about it when you return." She laughed, already turning the camera toward a glittering Eiffel Tower view, completely oblivious that she was bragging about spending money that wasn't even hers anymore. When the call ended, I sat in the silence of my kitchen and allowed myself a small, secret smile. Lydia thought she was cutting me out of my own life, but she was the one about to be cut out of a legacy she didn't even know existed. A week later, Daniel returned to the house on his own. When I arrived, I found him sitting in the study surrounded by open journals, tears streaking his face. He didn't look up when I entered. "He loved me," he whispered hoarsely. "He really did. He just didn't know how to love me openly." My own eyes filled. I walked over, placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Yes, he loved you, Daniel, with everything he had." He turned to me then, and for the first time, there was no bitterness in his gaze, only grief and a fragile hope. "I don't know if I can forgive him," he said quietly, "but maybe I can forgive myself for not being enough to make him stay." I squeezed his shoulder. "You were always enough. It wasn't you who failed him. It was the world he trapped himself in." That moment was a turning point. Slowly, Daniel began to let me into his life. We shared coffee in the dusty kitchen, walked through the overgrown garden, spoke of Charles as though weaving a bridge between past and present. It wasn't easy. Sometimes his anger flared, sometimes my sorrow overwhelmed me, but we kept returning to each other, bound by the same man who had left us both longing for more. And in those fragile beginnings, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, a reason to keep moving forward. Yet even as Daniel and I began stitching together the edges of our fractured stories, Lydia's shadow loomed larger. She had no idea about Daniel, no idea about the hidden house or the fortune Charles had left in my name. And I knew that when she returned from Europe, the storm she brought with her would crash against everything I had begun to build. But this time, I would not face it alone. What she didn't know was that her father's secrets had given me strength, had given me family where she had tried to take it away. And soon, she would discover that the woman she thought she had broken was far from finished. The day Lydia returned from Europe was both dreaded and inevitable. I knew the moment she set foot in the house that the air would thicken with tension. She arrived with a flourish, dragging her expensive luggage across the floor as though the tiles themselves should bow to her. Eric followed behind, speaking rapidly into his phone about some business deal, barely sparing me a glance. Lydia dropped her bags in the hallway, kissed me perfunctorily on the cheek, and announced, "Paris was life-changing, Mom. We're going to expand Eric's firm internationally. Imagine the Johnsons, a global name." I offered a thin smile, hiding the knowledge burning in my chest. She thought she had outgrown me, surpassed me, but she had no idea the ground beneath her was already crumbling. Dinner that evening was strained. Lydia filled the silence with stories of fine dining and Parisian boutiques, her voice loud and smug. "We met investors who practically begged us to partner with them," she said, tossing her hair. "Eric's brilliance just shines everywhere we go." Eric grunted without looking up from his phone, but Lydia either didn't notice or pretended not to. I pushed food around my plate, listening quietly, Every word out of her mouth was laced with the assumption that she held the power in the family now. She spoke of selling my home, of moving me into a simpler place, as though I were a burden she needed to manage. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that soon she would learn the truth. 2 days after her return, she stormed into the kitchen one morning, her face twisted with annoyance. "Mom, where have you been sneaking off to every afternoon? Don't think I haven't noticed. You disappear for hours, and when I ask, you're vague. What are you hiding?" My heart raced, but I kept my tone calm. "I take walks, Lydia. I need the fresh air." She narrowed her eyes, clearly unconvinced. "You're lying. You've never been a walker." She leaned closer, her voice sharp. "If you're planning something with Dad's estate, I'll find out. Everything he had belongs to me and Eric now. Don't forget that." I stared at her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You might be surprised what belongs to whom, dear." The way her face flushed with irritation told me my words had struck a nerve. That evening, Daniel called me. His voice was hesitant but warm. "I've been reading more of the journals. I think I'd like to meet again. Maybe even come for dinner if you'd have me." My heart swelled with relief. "Of course," I said quickly. "Come tomorrow. It's time." After we hung up, I sat in the darkened kitchen, knowing the storm Lydia feared was about to break in a way she could never have predicted. She had accused me of hiding something, she was right. But she had no idea that what I was hiding was her father's living legacy, flesh and blood, the half-brother she never knew existed. When Daniel arrived the next evening, I welcomed him at the door, my hands trembling with anticipation. He wore a clean shirt, his hair brushed neatly, though nerves showed in the way he shifted his weight. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. "She's not exactly known for kindness." I placed a hand on his arm. "I'm sure. She needs to know the truth, and you deserve to be seen." He nodded reluctantly, and together we stepped into the living room where Lydia lounged on the couch scrolling through her phone. She looked up, ready to scold me for interrupting her, but the moment her eyes landed on Daniel, she froze. "Who the hell is this?" she demanded, standing abruptly. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he met her gaze steadily. "My name is Daniel," he said. "I'm your father's son." The room went utterly still. Lydia's face drained of color before flushing red. "What kind of sick joke is this, Mom?" she spat. "Bringing some stranger in here, pretending he's family?" I stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. "It's not a joke, Lydia. He is Charles's son. Your father left journals, proof, even this house. He wanted Daniel to have what was denied to him in life." Lydia's eyes flickered wildly between me and Daniel, disbelief and fury battling across her face. No, Dad would never betray me like that. He was mine. Her voice cracked, desperation bleeding through her anger. Eric, drawn by the shouting, entered the room. He looked Daniel up and down, then turned to Lydia with a smirk. "If this is true, it complicates things. Inheritance laws aren't so simple. Maybe your father wasn't as generous to us as you thought." Lydia rounded on him, her eyes blazing. "Don't you dare side with them!" she screamed. This imposter is not my family." Daniel's hands trembled at his sides, but he didn't back down. "You don't have to accept me," he said quietly. "But I'm not going anywhere. Your father wanted me to be here, and I intend to honor that." The confrontation ended with Lydia storming upstairs, slamming her door so hard the walls shook. Eric lingered a moment, his calculating gaze fixed on me. "If what you're saying is true," he said slowly, "then perhaps we should all talk about arrangements." His tone made my stomach churn. I knew then that Lydia wasn't the only threat. Eric's greed was just as dangerous, perhaps even more so. But for the first time, I felt less alone. Daniel stood beside me, his presence solid and undeniable, and I knew that together we could withstand the storm Lydia and Eric were about to unleash. That night, as the house settled into uneasy silence, I lay awake, knowing the real battle had only just begun. Lydia's fury was a fire that would not burn out quietly, and Eric's ambition was a blade hidden in the dark. But I also knew something they did not. Charles had left more than journals in a house. He had left a map to assets Lydia couldn't even dream of, and soon, when the time was right, the balance of power would shift forever. The house was heavy with silence the next morning, the kind that pressed against your chest and made it hard to breathe. Lydia hadn't come down from her room, but I could hear her pacing above me, her heels clicking across the wooden floor like the ticking of a bomb waiting to go off. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at his untouched coffee. He looked younger in the daylight, almost boyish, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived too many lifetimes in the shadows. "She hates me," he said quietly, breaking the silence. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. "She doesn't even know you yet. Her anger isn't about you, it's about the truth she can't control." He nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. Eric entered a little later, his polished shoes clicking sharply on the tiles. His smile stretched too wide to be genuine. "Morning," he said, pouring himself coffee as though nothing unusual had happened last night. "So Daniel, was it? You've really stirred things up around here." Daniel met his gaze, unflinching. "I didn't come here to stir anything. I just came to claim what my father wanted me to have." Eric leaned against the counter, swirling his coffee, his expression calculating. Well, families can be messy, inheritance even messier, but everything can be negotiated. His tone made my skin crawl. I knew that look in his eyes. Eric saw people as pieces on a chessboard, and Daniel was just another pawn he intended to move. Later that afternoon, I heard Lydia and Eric arguing upstairs. Their voices rose and fell, sharp and venomous. "She's lying!" Lydia shrieked. "There's no way Dad had another son. He would have told me." Eric's reply was cold, almost mocking. "The documents are real, Lydia. The journals, the will, everything points to Daniel being legitimate. If you fight it, you'll lose." Lydia's voice cracked, full of desperation. "I won't share what's mine. I won't let him take it." There was a pause. Then Eric's voice dropped, low and dangerous. "Then we make sure he doesn't." A chill ran through me as I stood frozen outside their door, listening. I had always feared Eric's greed, but hearing it laced with such ruthless intent made my stomach twist. I backed away quietly before they could catch me, my mind racing. Daniel was in danger, and Lydia, blinded by her anger, was willing to destroy her own brother to keep her illusions intact. For the first time, I realized that this was no longer just about inheritance or houses. This was a battle for survival. That evening, I sat Daniel down in the garden, away from the ears that lurked within the walls. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of fire and ash. "You need to be careful," I whispered. "Lydia and Eric, they're planning something. I don't know what, but I can feel it." He frowned, his jaw tightening. "I've dealt with people like them before. I won't run." His voice was steady, but I could hear the anger simmering beneath it. "I've lived my whole life in the shadows, pretending I didn't exist. I'm not going to disappear again because it makes her comfortable." His words filled me with both pride and fear. The next day, I unlocked another drawer in Charles's study. Among the yellowed papers and faded photographs, I found a small leather-bound book with a brass clasp. Inside were notes written in Charles's hand, outlining investments I had never known about. Properties, stocks, even accounts overseas. My pulse quickened as I realized the scope of what he had hidden. This wasn't just a modest fortune, it was a kingdom. And Lydia, for all her arrogance, had barely scratched the surface of what Charles had built. She thought selling the beach house and my car had cut me down, but she was blind to the empire her father had left behind. As I sat there turning the fragile pages, a thought struck me. Charles hadn't hidden this wealth out of secrecy, he had hidden it out of protection. He must have known that Lydia's greed, fanned by Eric's ambition, would devour everything if left unchecked. But he had trusted me, and now, through me, Daniel. My hands trembled as I realized the power this knowledge gave us. For the first time since Lydia's betrayal, I felt not just anger, but strength. That night, I dreamed of Charles. He stood in the garden, the same place where Daniel and I had spoken, his hands folded behind his back. "Protect him," he said softly, his voice carried on the wind. "He is ours. He is part of me, part of you. Do not let them destroy him." I woke with tears on my cheeks, my resolve hardened. Charles's legacy wasn't just money, it was Daniel, and I would do whatever it took to keep him safe. When I came downstairs the next morning, Lydia was waiting, her arms crossed, her eyes wild with sleepless fury. You've ruined everything, she spat. I had a life, Mom. A perfect life. And now you've dragged this stranger into it, poisoning everything Dad built for me. I met her gaze calmly. He's not a stranger, Lydia. He's your brother. She shook her head violently. No, I don't accept it. I won't accept it. Her voice broke, a tremor of something deeper. Fear, maybe, or pain. But she masked it quickly with rage. If you think you can replace me with him, you're wrong. I'll make sure of it. And with that, she stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. I watched her leave, a pit of dread forming in my stomach. She wasn't just angry anymore, she was dangerous. And I knew that the war for Charles's legacy had only just begun. The days that followed were thick with tension, each moment stretching like a string pulled too tight, ready to snap. Lydia avoided Daniel altogether, but her silence was not peace, it was calculation. I could see it in the way she whispered with Eric in the study, their voices low but urgent, the way she would glance at me with eyes that burned with something darker than anger. She wasn't retreating. She was preparing for war. Daniel, for his part, tried to keep to himself, helping me in the garden, reading through more of Charles's journals, and asking quiet questions about the father he never knew. Yet I could see the weight of Lydia's hatred pressing on him, and the way Eric watched him like a wolf circling prey made my skin crawl. One evening, I overheard a phone call Lydia made in the kitchen. She didn't know I was in the hall, standing in the shadows. Her voice was sharp, desperate. I don't care how you do it. Just make sure his name never shows up on those papers. Discredit him. Destroy the documents, whatever it takes. If I lose even a cent to that man, I'll never forgive you. She paused, listening, then hissed, "Do it quietly. If my mother suspects, it'll be over." My blood ran cold. She was talking about Daniel, of course. She was trying to erase him before the law could even acknowledge him. I stepped back silently, my heart pounding. She was willing to commit fraud. Maybe worse, to keep her grip on what she believed was hers. The next morning, I gathered Daniel in the garden once more, the air thick with the scent of roses and damp earth. "She's going to come after you," I told him, my voice steady though my insides trembled. "She's planning to destroy the documents that prove you're right." Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing. "Let her try," he said. "I've lived without their acknowledgement for years. I don't need her validation, but I won't let her steal what's mine, what our father meant for me." His words carried a quiet strength, but I knew that Lydia and Eric played dirty, and Daniel had no idea how ruthless they could be. Later that day, I returned to Charles's journals, desperate for guidance. Buried in the last volume, I discovered a letter written in his neat, careful hand. It was addressed simply, "To the one who finds this." My hands shook as I read his words. He spoke of regrets, of mistakes made in secrecy, of a son he could not publicly acknowledge but loved deeply nonetheless. And then, near the end, a revelation. He had placed safeguards, accounts under Daniel's name, investments Lydia didn't even know existed. Proof that could not be erased with forged signatures or destroyed papers. My breath caught as I realized Charles had been one step ahead of her all along. That evening, Lydia confronted me in the living room. She was dressed impeccably, her makeup flawless, but her eyes were wild. "I know what you're doing," she snapped. "You think you can replace me with him, parade him around as some lost heir, but I won't let it happen. Dad wanted me to have everything, me. You're just too blind to see it." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a fleeting moment I saw the scared little girl she once was, clinging to her father's love as though it were the only thing keeping her afloat. But that softness vanished in the blaze of her fury. "Lydia," I said softly, "your father loved you, but love is not ownership. You can't erase the truth just because it hurts." She shook her head violently, tears gathering in her eyes. "No, I won't lose. I can't." And then she was gone, slamming the door behind her like a thunderclap. That night, as Daniel sat in the study, I told him about the letter, about the hidden accounts Charles had left in his name. His eyes widened, disbelief and gratitude warring across his face. "He really did think of me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "All this time I thought I was just a mistake. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You were never a mistake. He wanted to protect you, even when he couldn't be there. Tears glistened in his eyes, and for the first time, I saw not just the man but the wounded boy who had spent his life in the shadows, waiting for recognition that had finally come. But even as the truth gave us strength, I knew the danger was far from over. Lydia and Eric were cornered animals now, and cornered animals are the most dangerous. They would not accept this quietly. No, they would fight, claw, and scheme until the bitter end. And as I lay awake in the quiet hours of the night, I wondered what lines they would cross, what darkness they would unleash, to keep their fragile empire intact. The house no longer felt like a home. Every corner seemed to echo with suspicion, every shadow a threat. Lydia barely spoke to me, and when she did, her words were laced with venom. Eric prowled the halls with that calculating look in his eyes, speaking in hushed tones on the phone, his conversations clipped and secretive. I knew something was coming. The air itself seemed to hum with the promise of betrayal. Daniel kept close to me, but I could see the strain wearing on him. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for me. One evening, I returned from the garden to find the study door slightly ajar. Inside, Eric sat at Charles's desk, rifling through papers with a ferocity that made my stomach turn. He didn't notice me at first, too absorbed in his hunt. Then he looked up, his eyes narrowing when he saw me in the doorway. "Looking for something?" I asked, my voice steady though my hands trembled at my sides. He gave a cold smile, just making sure no forgeries or lies have made their way into these files. You know how messy estates can be. His words dripped with false civility, but I saw the threat in his eyes. He wasn't searching, he was stealing. That night, Daniel came to me with a folder clutched in his hands, his face pale. "They've already started," he whispered. "I went to check one of the banks your husband listed. Someone's been there before me. They've tried to freeze the account under claims of fraud." My heart sank, though I was not surprised. Lydia and Eric had connections, and they were using every one of them to discredit Daniel before he could even stand on his own. I reached for his hand. "We'll fight them. We have proof, Daniel. We just need to hold on until the right moment." But inside, fear gnawed at me. What if their lies buried us before the truth could rise? The next day brought confrontation. Lydia burst into the living room, her face pale with fury, waving a stack of papers. "See this?" she shouted. "This is what your precious Daniel has been doing, claiming accounts, forging documents, trying to steal what's mine." She threw the papers onto the table, her hands shaking. Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Those are my accounts. Father left them in my name. You're the one trying to erase me." Lydia's face twisted, her voice shrill. "You're nothing. A mistake. A lie my father carried. And I'll expose you for the fraud you are." Her words sliced the air like knives, but Daniel didn't flinch. He only looked at her with a quiet sorrow that seemed to unnerve her more than anger ever could. After she stormed out, Eric lingered. He leaned close to me, his voice low and venomous. "You're playing a dangerous game, Margaret. Whatever your husband left behind, it will destroy this family if you keep pushing. Is that really what you want?" I met his gaze without blinking. "The truth doesn't destroy families, Eric. Lies do." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Frustration, perhaps even fear, but then it was gone, replaced by that cold, cunning mask he always wore. That night, I returned to the journals, desperate for a lifeline. And there, tucked in the final pages of the last volume, I found it. A sealed envelope marked with Charles's handwriting. My breath caught as I broke the seal. Inside was a notarized statement, signed and dated, explicitly naming Daniel as his son and rightful heir to a portion of his estate. Not only that, but attached was evidence of a trust fund that Lydia and Eric couldn't touch, safeguarded by Charles's lawyer, with strict instructions that it could only be released to Daniel upon my approval. My hands shook as I held the papers, relief flooding me. This was it. The weapon Charles had left me, the final safeguard that could not be erased or forged. I showed Daniel, and his eyes widened with disbelief. "He really did protect me," he whispered, tears brimming. "All this time I thought I was abandoned. But he never stopped thinking of me." I hugged him tightly, my heart swelling with pride and sorrow all at once. But even as I clutched the papers, I knew we weren't safe yet. Lydia and Eric would not stop until they were ruined, or we were. And I feared they would rather drag us all into the flames than let go of their imagined throne. The next morning, Lydia confronted me again, her eyes wild with sleepless rage. "You think you've won, don't you? Bringing him here, digging through Dad's secrets, waving your precious papers around. But I swear to you, Mom, if Daniel takes even $1, I'll make sure you both regret it. I'll burn everything before I let him have it." Her words were a hiss, venom dripping from every syllable. I looked at her, my own daughter, and for the first time I felt not just anger but pity. She was drowning, clinging to an inheritance, as though it could fill the gaping hole her greed had carved into her soul. "Lydia," I said softly, "the more you fight the truth, the more it will consume you." She shook her head violently, tears spilling now. "No, the truth is mine. It's always been mine." And then she fled, leaving me with the echo of her madness. As I stood there, clutching Charles's final letter, I realized the endgame was approaching. Lydia and Eric had shown their hands, their desperation unraveling into recklessness. But I held the last piece, the undeniable truth that could end their charade once and for all. The only question left was whether revealing it would free us, or destroy us all in the process. The day of reckoning came faster than I expected. The house was charged with a tension so sharp it was almost unbearable. Lydia and Eric had called a meeting with Charles's lawyer, insisting that the will and all financial records be reviewed once again. I knew this was their last desperate attempt to erase Daniel from the picture and tighten their grip on everything Charles left behind. Daniel stood beside me as we entered the study, his jaw set, his eyes determined. I could feel the weight of his fear and his hope pressing into me, and I squeezed his hand to remind him he wasn't alone. Lydia sat stiffly in a high-backed chair, her eyes darting between us and the lawyer, her expression a mask of forced composure. Eric lounged at her side, trying to appear confident, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed his unease. The lawyer began to speak, calmly reviewing Charles's will and explaining what we already knew. But then Eric interrupted, slamming a folder onto the desk. "This," he said sharply, "proves Daniel has been forging documents, pretending to be someone he's not. There's no record of him in my father-in-law's official files, no mention of his name in the primary estate documents. This is fraud, plain and simple." Lydia leaned forward, her eyes gleaming as she added, "And if you don't acknowledge that, we'll take this to court and expose this entire charade." The lawyer glanced at the folder, flipping through the papers, and I saw the faintest flicker of confusion cross his face. Daniel stiffened, his knuckles white as he gripped the arm of his chair. But before panic could set in, I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope Charles had hidden in his journal. Slowly, deliberately, I placed it on the desk. "You want the truth?" I said softly. "Then let's have it." The room fell silent as the lawyer opened the envelope, carefully examining the notarized statement and trust documents. His brows furrowed, and then his expression shifted to something almost like awe. "This is authentic," he said firmly. "Signed, sealed, and notarized by Charles himself. There is no question. Daniel is recognized as his son and beneficiary. Furthermore, these documents establish a trust that cannot be contested by any other party. It is legally binding and protected." The color drained from Lydia's face, and she shot to her feet. "No, that's impossible. He never told me. He never..." Her voice cracked, and she turned to Eric, but he was already leaning back, his face pale, his mask of arrogance crumbling. "You set this up!" Lydia spat at me, her voice shaking with fury. "You manipulated him, forged this, tricked him into leaving that boy everything." I stood then, my voice steady. "No, Lydia. Your father loved you, but he also loved Daniel. He wanted the truth to live on, even if it hurt, and he wanted you to share in it, not destroy yourself trying to deny it." For a long moment, Lydia stood frozen, trembling with rage, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Then she screamed, a raw, broken sound, and swept the papers from the desk with one violent motion. They fluttered to the floor like wounded birds, but the truth could not be scattered so easily. The lawyer calmly gathered them again, his expression firm. "I'll be filing this immediately. There is no contest here. It is final." Eric muttered something under his breath, then stood and stormed out, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Lydia collapsed back into her chair, tears streaking her face, her fury finally cracking into despair. "He was mine," she whispered. "His love, his legacy, it was all supposed to be mine, and you took it from me." My heart ached as I looked at her, my daughter, broken by her own greed. "Lydia," I said gently, "your father's love was never a prize to be won. It was always yours, but you let envy blind you to it." She covered her face with her hands and sobbed, and for the first time I felt not anger, but mourning for the daughter I once knew, and the woman she had become. Daniel reached for my hand, his eyes shining with tears. "It's over," he whispered, though I could tell he didn't fully believe it. I squeezed his hand tightly. "Yes," I said softly, "it's over, for now, but healing will take time." In the days that followed, the lawyer moved swiftly to secure the trust and protect Daniel's inheritance. Lydia withdrew into silence, avoiding me, her pride shattered and her hatred simmering beneath the surface. Eric disappeared altogether, his schemes unraveled, his influence gone. The house grew quieter, but not peaceful. It was the quiet after a storm, where broken branches still litter the ground, and the air is heavy with what has been lost. Yet amid the wreckage, there was hope. Daniel began to breathe easier, his steps lighter as the weight of secrecy and denial lifted from his shoulders. One evening, as we sat together in the fading light, he turned to me and said, "For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong." Tears filled my eyes as I pulled him into an embrace. "You always did," I whispered. "Just took the world too long to see it." And as I looked out the window at the setting sun, I knew Charles's final gift had done more than secure Daniel's future. It had forced the truth into the open, shattering lies, breaking chains, and giving us the chance to begin again, even if beginning again meant walking through the ruins of what once was.